Hello, I'm Hamish the Plumber, specialising in small plumbing repairs. Today I want to look at a water saving issue, how you can save water on your water bill by changing your single flush toilet to a dual flush. Now here I have an older toilet. It's just the old-fashioned lever type with a siphon in it. In order to change this to dual flush, I don't have to replace the whole toilet. It's a nice toilet in a nice little cloakroom. I can just change the innards of the flush mechanism. So I've got my GoPro on, and you're going to be able to see close up what I'm doing. And so here goes. I'm going to take the lid off to start with. Okay, and I've already flushed it actually. So here it's got an old-fashioned ball valve and an old-fashioned siphon operated by that lever. Now I've got a couple of options for changing this to dual flush. One option would be to just replace this single flush siphon with a similar one that is dual flush. This is made by Fluid Master, and the way this works, if I install this, if I flush and let go, then it would do a full flush. But if you flush and hold until the flush is finished, then it does a reduced flush. The problem with that one is that a reduced flush requires patience, and the reality is most of us aren't really very patient. You go for a pee, you flush it, and you're not really going to think about holding it until it's stopped. And if you let it go too soon before the flush is finished, then it goes all the way and does a full flush. So actually, although that technically is a dual flush siphon, the reality is the reduced flush won't get used very much, and you won't really get much water saving by installing that. So the alternative, what I want to fit today, is I want to fit this kind of flush also by Fluid Master. This is my favourite brand for toilet spares, and this is very similar to the button version. They in fact they make a two-button version of the same flush, but they also do the lever version that you can fit on a toilet like this one. Let me open this up. So there we have our flush with an internal overflow. This toilet's got an external overflow. In fact, that will be somewhat redundant. Once I've installed this, it will overflow. If the ball valve failed, it would overflow down here, and then it would trickle into the pan. This valve, as I say, it's operated by this little lever, so it means you're replacing that one with this one. And the way this works, if you flush it downwards and let go, it does a full flush. If you flush it upwards and let go, then it does a reduced flush. And so instead of having to be patient, you just have to train yourself that when you go for a pee, you flush up instead of flushing down. And I think that's actually more manageable, and you might even be able to train your kids to do that and to use the reduced flush. Another thing I like about this kind of flush, it's got a couple of different adjusters here. This adjusts the volume for your full flush. So if I put that to the bottom, it will go. It will flush the maximum volume. If I raise it up slightly, it'll do slightly less on the full flush. Generally speaking, I put this down. Actually, when you have a full flush, when you want it to be full flush, you generally want the full volume. Otherwise, you may end up having to flush it twice. So I usually set that on the full. And this little slider here. With this one, you can adjust the volume for the reduced flush. So the further down you slide it, the more the greater volume that it will use on the reduced flush. So I would generally have that maybe about halfway. That one you can adjust it easily even after you've installed it. So let me put that aside. I've turned the water off. There's no isolator actually on this one. But I've turned the water off at the mains, and I've already flushed it. So let me let's first of all completely empty it. I'll get this shelf out of the way. I don't want to end up breaking that. So I'm going to remove the ball from the ball valve. and there's still a little bit of water in the bottom of this even though I've flushed it. So I'm going to remove that with a sponge, and an ice cream carton comes in handy as well for catching drips. Remove the screws that secure the cistern. Need to then undo the bolts that secure the cistern to the pan. Sometimes these get a bit rusted, which can sometimes make it a little bit more awkward. In this case they're okay. Now I'm also going to loosen this connector onto the ball valve. I'm gripping the thread with my pump pliers, and then loosening this with my adjustable. So I've got my drip tray in place. I'm going to drip just a little bit. So now I've removed those, I should be able to, I need to also undo the overflow in this case. And I'm just going to gently lift this off. There's still a little bit of water in here that I'm going to empty down the pan. Now I'm going to place a cloth on top of the toilet seat so that I don't mark this, and then I can put this here. Not a very good donut, but it doesn't seem to have leaked. So I need to remove this one. Actually, before I go further, I think I might need my hacksaw for that. looking at that. Ideally, of course, I wouldn't have to use the hacksaw in that, but in this particular case, the plastic arm has very well sealed onto this. This is corroded, and it's not very easy to get that off. So sometimes it's easy to get the hacksaw out and cut through that. Next, I'm going to remove the old siphon. Now, this is all a bit of a mess, actually. So this must be fitted with 2 donuts. I don't think this was really fitted by a pro. Looking at it, let's just clean this up a little bit. Take a Stanley blade and just get all that. It's been packed with plumber's mate. Let's take that off. Back nut, and then remove the close coupling plate. Sometimes these get really rusty and you have to replace them. In this case, it's actually alright, just needs cleaning up a little bit. So now I can lift that out. Okay, so here you can see just that's a normal siphon. Quite often you find when these, a fault that develops with these is this diaphragm, this thin bit of plastic in here, eventually it begins to split. Once it starts to split, you can see this one's actually getting big, just got a tiny split in it, it's not too bad. But once those split badly, then you end up having to pump the lever several times, often in order to make it flush. These are replaceable, but with one like this you have to remove the whole system and the back nut in order to get at this and change that. Anyway, I'm going to replace that with a dual flush one, so put that aside. Now I'm also going to change the ball valve. This is, I've got an old-fashioned one. I'm going to put in a more modern one. This is my favourite ball valve, made by again by Fluidmaster, and I have very little problem with these. One of the things I like about these is it has a brass thread here, the shank, and that gives you generally a more reliable connection from the supply onto there rather than a plastic one. So put that aside a moment, and I'm going to take off this old one. So let's fit the new flush. Now, before I put this in, I'm going to use some of this stuff. This is LSX. It's a special kind of silicone. This is about £6.50 or £7 a tube, but it's amazing stuff. Normal silicone, you have to let it dry for 24 hours before it's watertight. But with this one, it actually it reacts with water, and the water acts as a catalyst that makes it go hard. And so, in fact, you don't have any waiting time with this at all. So, just going to put a little, I think that's, just going to put a little bit of this around the edge. And this helps give a more watertight seal. There we go. So then I put my my close coupling plate back on, and back plate. To line this up nice and straight in the middle. Now it's just a plastic thread. I don't want to over tighten this, but just a little bit. So now I'm going to fit the ball valve. First of all, put on the rubber seal, and then once again I'm going to put some LSX around here. First of all, we're just going to check the height on this. Go down a little bit. That's about right. Now again, I don't want to over tighten this, but just enough to give a good seal. Now I need to work out which is the best kind of donut for this. Always when you've taken a cistern off and you've disturbed the existing donut, you always want to replace that donut. I've got three kinds, and this is generally my favourite one, the foam one. And so with this one, I'm going to put a little bit of LSX on this on one side, on the side that is against the metal coupling plate. So just around that edge. And that fits nicely over there. Now I'm almost ready to put this back on. Before I do that, one other thing I need to change is the fibre washer on the supply pipe. Sometimes it's a little bit of a fiddle getting these out. Again, this is another thing that once it's been disturbed, you always want to change a fibre washer. Got two slightly different sizes now. I think that's the first one's the better one. I don't really like all this plumber's mate there. I'm going to clean that up a little bit. So now I've cleaned that up, I'm ready to put this back on. I need the bolts that go in here, and there should be another one somewhere. There we go. So I'm going to gently lower that on. The fiddly things. There you go, got it. Get the overflowing heat into the right place. Now before I connect this up, I think actually I'm going to put an isolator on here. This toilet really ought to have an isolating valve. Clean that up a little bit. Now I'm going to have to take a little bit off this just to allow for the extra length that the isolator gives. So I need to take about 14 mil off actually from here. And get rid of the paint a little bit. Put a little bit of Boss White compound on there. It's helpful on a compression joint. turn this isolator off to the off position. Obviously the mains is turned on off at the moment, so turn that off, and I'm going to turn the mains on just a moment. I haven't done this connector up too tight yet, just a little bit more than I could tighten it by hand. Don't want to over tighten this connector. Right, I think I'm ready to turn the water on. Now I've turned the water on. Just going to tighten this one a little bit more. I'm holding the brass thread. That's probably enough for now. So now I can turn the water on. And now that it's filled up, so I'm going to just check each of these connections quite carefully, and those all look watertight. I'm going to check it again in 5 or 10 minutes just to make sure that all's still dry, that there isn't any slow weep. Okay, and now it's filled up to the line. This toilet's on a full flush. It's designed to use a volume of water with the water up to that line. That's probably on this toilet, that's the 7.5 litres. On a modern toilet it would be the 6 litre line. If it was not at that line, then I would adjust this little screw here on the ball valve to either raise or lower that. And you can see it's about an inch below the overflow. I've also got this has got its built-in overflow, and so it's about an inch below those two. Right, so just looking at how this works. So if I flush up and let go, you see that it does a reduced flush. Whereas if I flush it downwards, then you can see that it goes all the way and it does a full flush. And it's stopped at the line, which is good. So that's operating correctly, and I think it's just perfect. If I wanted to, I could adjust the slider for the reduced flush, and I could just change how much volume there is on that reduced flush if I wanted to, but I think it's set correctly. And so let me put the system lid back on, and we're just going to dry up a little bit. check to make sure that this is still dry, which it is. All good, job done. So there we go, job done. We've installed a modern dual flush system in an old-fashioned lever flush toilet. What's that sort of upgrade going to cost? Well, the parts that I've used today are approximately £50, and there's about an hour's labour. It's around about £100 of an upgrade. But over the next year or two, by having a dual flush system, you should save at least that sort of money on your water bill. And so within about 1 to 2 years, effectively, that's a free upgrade. And then beyond that, it's just going to pay you dividends because you're going to be saving on an ongoing basis. So there we have a way of saving water and saving money.